Disowned at birth by his obscenely wealthy family, blue-collar Beckett Redfellow will stop at nothing to reclaim his inheritance, no matter how many relatives stand in his way. So, in order for Beckett to make a killing, all he has to do is, well, some killing. Which means that How to Make a Killing is a fun little black comedy about eating the rich. Unfortunately, while the film's concept is admittedly entertaining, the actual story seems to be lacking something. Sure, the movie is inherently satirical in nature, but the humor isn't as clever as I wanted it to be. The social commentary isn't as sharp or as insightful as I wanted it to be, and the message isn't as clear as one would expect for it to be. I wasn't sure how I was supposed to feel throughout the entirety of the film because I wasn't sure about what the movie was actually trying to say. I mean, I was never really rooting for Beckett to get away with these murders, and it never really feels like the movie was either. But I think I was only conflicted about Beckett as a character because the film doesn't really spend a lot of time fleshing him out as a character. We don't really get to learn a lot about Beckett as an individual, and that made it hard for me to really connect with his struggle, if you could even really call it that. Because I don't think Beckett really explored all of the options that were available to him before deciding that he should just go ahead and murder his entire family. Granted, Glenn Powell is a fun and charismatic actor, so he does a solid job of leading this film. I just wish we got to learn a little bit more about his character. And maybe this is just me, but there are certain moments where it feels like Powell is overacting a bit, like he's chewing up the scenery a little bit too much for my own personal taste. So after my disappointment with last year's The Running Man, I think I can safely say that I like Glenn Powell better as a supporting actor than I do as a leading one. Plus, for all of the quirky side characters that are featured in this film, none of them really get the chance to feel properly developed, which is disappointing because I was looking forward to seeing some of the members in the ensemble cast. But actors like Topher Grace or even Ed Harris really only get one scene in the entire film. And I do like those individual scenes. I mean, Ed Harris gets a fun sequence where he's chasing around Glenn Powell in a mansion with a shotgun, which feels like a scene ripped straight out of Resident Evil or something. But for as entertaining as these scenes were, they weren't enough to make up for the surprising lack of substance or the underwhelming lack of character development. Margaret Qualley is really fun as a femme fatale of sorts, for example, but again, we don't really get to learn much about her character, so she really doesn't have much to do in the film until the third act, which is really disappointing because it feels like the movie definitely could have done a lot more with her character. But my favorite performance probably comes from Jessica Henwick, who basically acts as the only decent human being in the entire film. Aside from the actor who plays the priest, of course. Though, now that I'm thinking about it, are priests not legally required by law to report when someone actively admits to committing several different murders? I'm just really confused by that. Is that not a thing? Does he not have a moral and legal responsibility to report such a thing? Because that would make for a pretty big plot hole in this film's finale. But whatever, I guess. How to Make a Killing is an admittedly fun and even twisted little film, and while I did happen to enjoy it overall, I was disappointed with the lack of nuance, complexity, and depth in the themes and in the story. The film is just nowhere near as strong as director John Patton Ford's last film, Emily the Criminal. That movie is incredibly engaging, and it tells a far more personal story, while also featuring the sharp teeth that this film is desperately lacking. Still, I wouldn't say that this is a bad movie by any means, so despite having some personal issues with it, How to Make a Killing would still get a mild recommendation from me. But be sure to let me know what you thought of the film, and as always, thanks for watching.